Greetings, everyone. This is Jay Tucker over at UCLA Anderson Center for MEMES. I'm really excited because today we're going to get to have a conversation about a lot of different things. We'll get to talk about the television business, empowerment, entrepreneurship, and a lot more. I'm really pleased to be joined by Annie Scranton, who's the founder, solopreneur of Pace Public Relations, which has now grown into quite an interesting organization that gets, I think, a lot of credit, and deservedly so, for making folks famous. So let's jump right in. Annie, could you just talk a little bit about what you're working on right now?
Sure. So at my PR firm currently, we are working on pitching our clients who are political pundits or reporters on the major cable news networks and national news networks for commentary around the debate, which is tonight. And for our lifestyle and products clients, we're doing a lot of heavy gift guide pitching as well. So those are two kind of top of mind stuff that we're working on today.
Perfect entry point. So the center focuses on the business of entertainment. A lot of times we talk about, really scripted experiences, whether we're talking about animation, feature film, streaming, video games, and so on. Very, very different from what you're talking about, which is this space where we're talking about news, media, unscripted, and allowing people to have some level of thought leadership, right? To go out there and be experts that can kind of help get the public smarter about different topics, that they're deeply invested in. Could you just talk a little bit about what your pitch process is like? Because I imagine that it's not quite the same thing as what a person would do if they were trying to pitch their TV pilot.
Right. So that's totally different, because in that instance, you're trying to get a network to actually, buy your product and put it on the air and have it become a series, a show, a documentary, what have you. The types of clients that we work with run businesses, run brands, corporations, nonprofits, et cetera, and they want to get featured in the media. So the media primarily to us sort of dovetails with news, lifestyle, and entertainment media. And so a lot of what we do around thought leadership is taking the founder, the CEO, the president, whoever is sort of the face of the company, and putting them on TV news programs, when relevant, booking them on shows like Entertainment Tonight or E! News, getting them featured in magazines or newspapers, not only to talk about the specific product or company that they represent, which sometimes may not really be relevant for an earned media placement, because there has to be some kind of news value, some sort of takeaway that's going to be relevant for the viewer of that show watching. So a lot of times we will align the CEO or whoever the speaker is from the organization as a thought leader. So meaning finding a news story that's sort of trending and popular right now, and then seeing what is it in their background that makes them uniquely qualified to speak on that topic as a subject matter expert, as a thought leader, as a commentator.
So it seems to me, from that point of view, that this is kind of a tricky juggling of two things. I'm sure for each of these clients, you have a communication strategy, which is kind of a longer term effort to raise their visibility and so forth. But you're talking about pitching based on opportunities, right? So external events, real life situations, and so on. And those things don't always line up. How do you, one, take maximum advantage of the stuff that's going on in the real world to showcase your clients? And two, how does the relationship between you and these media outlets, how does that work? Like, what do you do to even have that access?
Well, so I'll start with the second question. So getting the access is really the hardest part. And I think there's really 2 points of entry. One is by actually having a real relationship or working to build a real relationship with a reporter or editor or producer who you're pitching, who you're trying to get in front of. For me, I worked at the first part of my career as a TV news producer at multiple networks. So I came into the PR world with a built-in set of contacts at multiple networks with multiple journalists and members of the media. But when you're trying to build those relationships, it's really important to take the time to try to research and get to know who it is specifically that you're pitching. So it's easy to do nowadays because everyone's on social media. And so it's very easy to say, okay, I really want to get my client featured on, Entertainment Tonight. Well, it's pretty easy through a simple Google search to find out who's the producer, who's the booker, the editorial producer for that show. And then it's pretty easy to also just see what their Twitter feed is like, check them out on LinkedIn, Instagram. But then also it's really important to watch the show that you're pitching. Sounds so intuitive, sounds so basic, but you'd be surprised how many times, publicists send out a mass pitch, or they just believe so deeply in what they're pitching that they don't take the time to really try to ascertain if the show they're pitching is a good fit, for their product. So I would say that's one very important step towards building those relationships, is to take your time to do the research on the person you're pitching and the outlet you're pitching. But also it's really important too to make sure that you're on brand when you are pitching the specific reporter or show. Clearly watch the kind of commentary and subjects that they're used to reporting on. It's a really good idea when reaching out to a journalist to mention in like the first sentence of the email that you read one of their previous pieces and you enjoyed it, and try to just make it as personal and real as possible. Like, pick out a specific detail, because journalists are getting hundreds and hundreds of pitch emails a day. And so without standing out in your email, it's going to be very hard to break through and not just get an automatic delete, because that's what so many of them do nowadays, because they just can't keep up. But journalists don't get paid a lot of money. There's not a lot of accolades. They're always sort of getting dissed in the press and this, that, and the other. So if you can do a little bit of flattery and, tell them you enjoy their work and why or whatever, that's a really good entry point. And try to just have, a subject line in your email that's really eye-catching. That would help a lot as well. And so then when you're trying to make the most of sort of a moment that's happening, even if there's not a moment that's happening, there's likely some way that you can try to pivot either yourself or your client or whoever it is you're working with as a thought leader. I would say, every industry has their own trade publication. So obviously in the entertainment space, it's Variety, it's Deadline, it's those sort of outlets. So, I would say to make it a point to read those publications, see what's happening, and, try to pick out trends that are happening, whether it's, women in film or, Black directors or whatever the subject is. And then, try to think of what your opinion, what your take on it would be, because that's really what we do with our clients is we pitch their point of view for interviews on live TV or in magazines, et cetera. So you can start though by going on your own LinkedIn and writing a really short LinkedIn post saying, I read this article today and it kind of got me thinking about ABC. And, it's a good way to just sort of get your feet wet by putting it out there, sort of your perspective. You'd be surprised. A lot of people, I think, really react to that kind of language that you post on LinkedIn, because it's sort of, if you write it in the right way, it can sort of elevate you and make it almost seem like, you're even more entrenched in the industry than you already are. And then, of course, once you sort of can hone in on your writing skills, you could try to pivot and turn, a blog post into more of a formal op-ed that you could pitch to get placed at a newspaper or a big website. Or, if you or your client is ready, then you could obviously pitch them for TV interviews as well around it.
So I think about a couple things as you describe this process. The first is that there are so many platforms right now that trying to elevate some of your clients is probably a little bit more tricky than it would have been, say, 10, 15 years ago, because part of it is also trying to make sure that they're seen in the spaces that are most relevant. And as we continue to kind of fragment people's attention and fragment audiences, that's got to be tricky. How do you deal with that?
So, the good news is that there's more outlets than ever because there's 1,000,001 new streaming networks and shows and podcasts. And, there's a lot more outlets that you can pitch. But at the same time, the real estate and sort of the top tier outlets, like ABC News or NPR or whatever, it's getting harder and harder to get placed on there because more and more people are just trying to put themselves out there, and get that sort of real estate on these top tier shows. So what we try to do, and what I think is just a good business practice, is to really try to identify from day one, what are your clients' goals? Like, what are the media outlets that are most important to them? And so likely every business owner on the planet is going to benefit if they get featured on, say, the Today Show or NPR or, one of the big media outlets. But it's important to understand what your clients' audiences? What are the demos that they're trying to reach? Is there a specific geographic area that's really important to them for sales or for some other reason? A lot of times clients come to us and they're trying to raise money. So getting in front of more financial outlets like CNBC or Wall Street Journal or whatever may be more important to them. So I think it's understanding your client's goals, but then always doing a mix of pitching, of course, the tier one outlets, but then going all the way down from, maybe streaming or local or trade publications, because in our experience, press begets press. So, you get one hit, it kind of leads to another, you put it out there on social, et cetera, and it kind of hopefully creates that snowball effect.
Now, from that point of view, it's funny because that segues into the other piece I wanted to ask you about, which is ROI. So you talk about trying to work out some goal setting up front, which obviously is probably critical with each client and is going to be different for each client. But then there's not always a direct translation between what the client's actual goals are, some of which you just laid out, and what you can do, which is to give them a platform, right? So how do you square those things? How do you show them kind of the value add of the media placement that you do?
Well, I mean, first of all, we're super, super upfront and honest at the very beginning because, if a client comes to us and they're like, we want to hire you so we could sell more product, that's automatically a red flag to me, because what I do, which is public relations, is really about raising the legitimacy and the credibility of the brand and building that overall brand awareness. But when it comes to measuring that in the world of PR, it's very difficult. If you work in direct marketing or SEO or advertising, there are ways you can measure pretty precisely, sort of where your dollars are going. But when you hire a PR firm, which takes a monthly retainer, it's all sort of on spec. I mean, we don't make any promises or any guarantees, and any ethical publicist will do the same because we are pitching real journalists, real reporters, real producers, and there's no quid pro quo. You could do like a sponsored post or a pay to play, but that's not the same as earned media. And when it's earned media and you're pitching a real reporter, they don't owe you anything. They don't have to write about what you're pitching to them. They don't have to put your guest on TV. So I think in large part, it's sort of explaining the process to the client even before they sign on. But then at the same time saying to them, which I believe to be true, is that there's really nothing that can elevate your profile the same way as really good earned media. Because if your client wakes up and, there's a big spread on them in the New York Times or USA Today, or, you get them on Morning Joe or whatever, people are going to see that, and it's going to trickle down in ways that only reveal themselves as the process goes along. I've had clients who have met business partners in the green room, at a news channel. I've had clients who have posted their interviews on Facebook and had, new customers reach out that way, or had old high school teachers say, oh, I want to connect you with somebody who may be good for your business. So it's more just that like PR and the media that we get for our clients is putting it out there in the ether and then kind of seeing what comes back. So it's important to understand that because not every client has a limitless budget, and when you think of the media, there are so many cogs that make up that wheel, and PR is just one percentage of them, but it's a really important part of it.
So I want to stay on that. We're in this environment now where we are seeing a real shift in the way content is created and the way content is monetized. And I think to a degree, we're moving into an era where it's not so much about people trying to make money off of a show as it is that they're making money off of a following. And this includes kind of news media as well. And so obviously, there's this virtuous cycle that happens as folks get to put their expertise on display, on larger and larger platforms. More people are paying attention, which makes more folks want to, solicit their opinion and so on. Can you talk about that process of growing a following? I feel like for any business professional, that has value, but certainly folks who trade on their expertise, I think there's a lot that folks can do. You mentioned some of the things they can do with LinkedIn, but how do you see that process of individuals kind of growing their following based on expertise?
I mean, I think it's so important because the way that consumer trends have been changing is that not only do consumers want to buy into products and brands that are doing good in the world, and are sustainable and giving back and all that good stuff, but they also are looking at the founders or the leaders of that company for inspiration, for their leadership, for, the innovative ideas that they may have. And so I think as a startup, a mid-sized company or whatever, it's important to remember that the person at the head of your company is now more than ever a public facing, representation of what you're trying to grow. And I think also it can lead certainly to other revenue streams, for your business. For example, I have a lot of clients that over the years have pivoted, and because they've grown a following in the media, they've been able to kind of pivot away from their day job into becoming consultants, or advisors on different projects. It used to be that you would go in the media and then you could have enough followers to write a book or maybe become a paid contributor on a network. And all of those options still are available. But now I think there's a real need and desire for the consumers and the followers of the founders of these iconic brands that we love to work with them if they can, or have them speak, somewhere if they can. So building a social following or building a following in general, I think is something that you need to understand takes time. It's not something that's going to happen overnight, or if it does, you got lucky, or I don't know if it's going to last for forever. And I think it's important to just always be really authentic and genuine to who you are and the content that you're putting out there. I think that when you're thinking about growing a following, people are following you because they want to see the real you. I think we've all been able to, ascertain at this point, a post from one of the Kardashians is basically an ad for whatever, company or product they're trying to promote. And that's fine. That's what they do. But I think, for people who are more in the business space or up and coming, it's important to just stay in your lane, but be authentic to it. And I think, too, it's one of those things that you may have to try a few different things and kind of see what feels good and what's really resonating with your audience before you can, very accurately say, okay, this is my brand. Sometimes building your brand and building that following takes time and can happen over several iterations.
It's funny, you talk about being authentic and knowing your strengths and your interests and so on. And I realized that we buried the lead to a certain degree. We didn't talk about your transition from working as a producer to going into the business, right? Can you just talk a little bit about that journey? Because I think it's really interesting.
Sure. Yeah. So, I grew up idolizing Katie Couric, watched her every morning on the Today Show. And so just sort of wound up following that dream and worked, right after college as a producer at MSNBC, and wound up switching networks many times over the course of my career, which was for 8 years in my 20s. So I worked at MSNBC and CNN and Fox News and GMA and the Today Show and CNBC and HLN. I worked at almost all the networks. And I was always what's known as a booker. So I was the person responsible for finding the guest for my anchor to interview on whatever segment or show we were doing that night. And my transition to PR happened actually because the show I had been working on got canceled. And I, along with everyone else on the staff, got laid off. And it was something, we didn't see coming. I was like 28, I had no money in the bank. It was like, sort of scary situation. And I sent out an email to everyone in my world saying, my show got canceled. I lost my job. I need a job. Let me know if you know of anything. And I got back an email that changed the whole course of my life. It was from a publicist who I had known over the years and worked closely with, booking his clients on the shows I was working on. And he put it out there to me saying, I know you haven't worked formally in PR, but I have this great client. If you can, talk to any friends you may have in the network and can get him booked, I'd be happy to work out a financial arrangement for you. And so I did just that. I was able to get his client booked really, really quickly, like in a day, made some money, and realized that that was likely my special currency, was that I was able to get access to news producers, which is something that it's easy enough to find their email addresses and send them emails and things like that. But it's really hard to get a response unless you have a perfect pitch or represent a big, big name, or the producer really well. And so I sort of realized that that was something unique about me. And so after that experience happened, I wound up taking another full-time job at another network, but I kept doing the PR thing on the side. This is 10 years ago, so it was like my side hustle before side hustle was a thing. And I did that for about a year and a half. I sort of double dipped and did both. And then when I was 30, I realized that it was kind of now or never. Let me just go out there on my own and, give it a shot. And that was 10 years ago. And now here we are. So that was sort of how my transition happened from TV into PR, which is also a pretty common transition. A lot of producers go into PR.
Yeah, but not a lot of folks go from working as a producer to starting their own companies.
Well, that's true. And I should say too, like, I never, ever, ever thought that I was going to be a business owner. Like, it was never something I aspired to. It's never something I thought about. Like, it was not even in my path. But I don't know. I just realized that I really enjoyed the process of continuing to be able to connect people, and to sort of like every day it was like closing a deal, like getting a booking, getting somebody to take the interview. And for me, just the transition of starting the business really just happened organically and over time.
So can you talk a little bit about the process of growing the business and some of the things that you had to consider that maybe, as you said, moving into being a business owner wasn't something that you had planned to do. And some of the elements of what you do were covered by other entities. So, what was it like having responsibility for everything, getting people to work with you? Like, what was that journey like?
Yeah, I mean, well, it's still one that I'm on, and it's still one that's evolving over time. But, I was fortunate because when I officially went out on my own and was doing PR full time and started my company, it was just me. I worked from my studio apartment, but working in the service industry, all you need in terms of, overhead is a phone, internet, and a laptop. So I had really no expenses, which was great. On the downside, there were moments where I was saying, oh my God, where am I going to get my next client from? Or I would just be working so hard on different projects that I would go, an entire day without even leaving my apartment or seeing anybody. So there was like lots of different things that I wasn't anticipating would be sort of unique challenges along the way. I would just say that all of it, I learned as I went along. I was also lucky because working in TV, I had just met so many different types of people that when I needed to incorporate my business, like, okay, I have no idea what that even means. What do I do? I was able to call a friend who is an attorney who I had booked on one of the networks. And he was like, oh yeah, like, here's what you need to do. I'll help you along the process. You should be an S Corp, not an LLC, so I was able to just sort of get different advice and take a lot of generosity from just people in my network. But Google is your friend. Everything you need to learn, you really can find out on the internet or by just asking people in your work. But, it was a challenge. It became more of a challenge as I employed my first hire, and kept growing that way because then, you have to get like a payroll system, you have to get a 401k plan, you have to get healthcare, then you have to get office space. So it was a process where I think it became equal parts like overwhelming because I had never done any of that admin kind of stuff. And also, somewhat concerning because it's all these extra expenses keep building up. But the thing I think that helped me succeed in the early days was that I just went really, really slow. I worked on my own for probably 2 years before I made one hire. And then, for a long time, it was just me and one other person. And then for like another year, it was just me and two people. And sort of the more accelerated growth my company went through was when I was like maybe 5, 6, 7 years in business. And by that point, we were already a little bit more established, et cetera. So I would say the biggest piece of advice I could definitely give that I think helped me was just going really slow. So that way you don't, overload on expenses too soon.
All right. So we're nearing the top of the hour, and I want to tell folks who are participating in this conversation that you can ask questions as well. If you move your mouse down to the bottom of the screen, you'll see a little button that says chat. If you type any questions in the chat window, we'll try to work those into the conversation. And really, after 2 or 3 more questions from me, I'll take exclusively questions from you. So don't be shy. Don't hesitate. If you want to jump into the conversation, please do. Just chat your questions and I'll keep an eye on them. I want to come back to, we were talking about expertise, and you've been fortunate enough to bring a lot of very smart people onto a lot of media platforms. In the work that I do at the center, I feel like sometimes I get different responses when I reach out to innovators and business leaders who are men versus, experts and innovators who are women. Have you experienced that in your work? What is it like trying to get, trying to showcase women in the media space?
Well, the future is female, as you can see from my shirt. But we love to work with women and get them out there. And we're one benefit of Me Too, and the Black Lives Matter movement is that the networks and the media in general have absolutely made and held to a concerted effort to have more female voices in the media and more persons of color in the media as experts and commentators. So that's obviously a really, really good thing. And it's actually a real benefit because when I'm pitching, especially to think of like CNBC, when you turn on CNBC, it's mostly like old white guys, like giving stock picks and financial news analysis. So if I'm able to pitch like a Black female who works at a major, wealth management company, there's a good chance I'm going to be able to get her booked over, a white guy who I also represent. I would say that in terms of like more of the client relationship side of things, what I've noticed is that oftentimes our female clients are less comfortable sort of pivoting or going outside their lane a little bit. I think that just a stereotype, but one that I think is true, is that women are more likely to be perfectionists and are more likely to want to stick to what they know. And, if there's an opportunity for them to comment on something slightly outside their scope, but still within, the bigger picture, I've had female clients over the years say, no, I think there's someone better for it. I'm not really sure if I should be the one commenting on this. Whereas I've noticed with male clients, they're like, oh yeah, I could do it. I'll jump right in. I could totally just research that and talk about it. No problem. And so I think that is one way that potentially women could be missing out on more opportunities in the media. At the same time, we never want to make anybody say or do anything that they're not going to feel comfortable with, or that they're not going to, perform well, so to speak, when they're doing these media opportunities. But that's just one kind of difference that I've definitely noticed amongst the two genders.
Well, it's funny because, I feel like when we have media outlets, events, and other ways that people kind of experience, the community, right? Mediated through some kind of experience. When we have multiple people speaking on that platform, it's also an indication of what we think leadership looks like. And, you and I have talked a little bit about some of the clients that you've had, and there are a number of really dynamic women who have started their own businesses, not just you, but folks who, like you, have started their own businesses. And I think it's important that we make sure that these media outlets are a platform where we can equally celebrate, the successes of women, the innovation of women, and learn to listen to women when they've got advice to share. I'm wondering if there's any advice you would give to, entrepreneurs, women business leaders, folks who are thinking about how to kind of find their voice. What would you tell them about, getting access to media platforms, making themselves available, sharing their expertise?
Yeah, I mean, I think the bottom line of how you're the barrier to entry for getting featured in the media is to have a great idea, a great product, a great service, or real expertise in some way. You can't like fake those things, So the first things first, you need to build a company and build a product that is really truly going to be different or do something better than the competition out there. I would say then, for expectations in terms of the media, you should go slow and understand that the process with the media is just that. It's a process, and sometimes it can take years, to get to the stature that you hope that you're going to have for your company. What I would suggest doing is doing some, research and analysis for competitors in the field and seeing what kind of press they have gotten over the years. I would make sure that your messaging is really, really tight and compelling in terms of making sure it's blatantly obvious to the journalists you're pitching why your product, why your brand is superior and better and different than the others out there. The other thing is that if you're looking to be more of like a thought leader or a commentator in some space, one thing to consider is that you're likely going to get more people reacting to you if you can take a counterintuitive point of view, on a subject matter. Always staying authentic, always staying genuine to who you are, but to try to remember that, like if you have, a very obvious, narrative, there's going to be probably 100 other people with that same sort of point of view. So if there's a way you can think of how to refresh it, reframe it, to have a little bit of a spin on it while still, maintaining your integrity, and feeling good about it, that's another way that I would look at it. I would say in terms of like first getting media exposure, think locally for sure. Not only where you live currently, but where you grew up, because your local hometown paper, they might love a story on, the success that you've been having over the years, or that you've launched a company or what have you. And then, when you're ready to sort of pitch more national outlets, you have to do your research. It's just the most important thing is to make sure you know who you're pitching and the types of stories that they're interested in. But I also think it's okay to try to develop a real and genuine relationship with members of the media. They're all open on Twitter. Follow them, try to interact with them in real and meaningful ways on the stories they post, or, the things that you can comment on. And, just to remember that journalists are people too. And, they're going through a million things like we all are right now. And so to just kind of keep that in mind when you're reaching out to them, it doesn't have to be robotic. You can try to be real, but just remember that the journalists don't owe you anything. The relationship, like I always say to our clients, is 99-1. 99% we have to give to try to get featured and to try to get you in the media. And the 1% we get back is when you're sitting in that chair and you start doing the interview, or when the article comes out in the newspaper.
So you got a lot of specific recommendations there. Is there someone out there? Is there a woman in business or a woman thought leader that you think of who has done amazing work in terms of kind of building their platform and becoming known?
Yeah, I mean, Ariana Huffington, Sheryl Sandberg, are a couple that just sort of really come to mind for sure. And I think, myself included, those are two women in business who, one, Ariana, who has her own platform, of course, and then Sheryl, who works at a big company, but that have been able to make names for themselves, and sort of take their expertise and pivot it into, their own brand. And, everybody thinks of Lean In when they think of Sheryl Sandberg. They think of HuffPost and Thrive when they think of Ariana. So I would say those two women certainly have done something right.
Yeah, for sure. And you mentioned, how this time right now is crazy. How has the coronavirus situation affected your role and the work that you and your team do?
Well, I mean, it's affected our workplace because we all are working virtually. So that's number one. So we've had to really, lean into platforms like Slack and Zoom and FaceTime and whatever, to try to just stay connected. We're really fortunate because in PR, you can certainly do your job remotely 100% of the time, but you lose that creativity that you have when you're sitting next to a colleague and you're bouncing ideas around really easily. So that's certainly been something that we've had to adjust to. But in the early days of the pandemic, we lost a lot of clients, clients that were in the travel space or luxury or retail, when those industries were just becoming decimated. And so we had to figure out how we could try to reach out to and make ourselves available to other types of clients that, that had a company or a product or expertise that could really be useful right now. So, we leaned into working with telemedicine companies, psychologists, remote learning professionals, people like that. And then, the big curve is that, we always practice like sort of sensitivity in pitching and making sure that we're on brand and, and we're not pitching something crazy, to the wrong type of producer. But we had to guide our clients as to how they also should navigate their outreach to their client base. Like, for example, we have a direct-to-consumer jewelry company, and she was getting ready to do her quarterly newsletter. And, so we talked through just some ideas on how it was okay for her to, of course, shine a light on the new products and the new jewelry offerings that she had, but to work with her in sort of her letter to her subscribers on sort of just addressing the pandemic and the times that we're in. And I think just sort of, guiding and being there as a resource for our clients as to how to make sure that we all sort of stay human in this process, because, not only is the right thing to do, but I think it just is good business practice and ultimately yields to more business connections, and more success to your company.
Absolutely. We all should have empathy, right? That's a great place to start. And it's interesting because I feel like right now, so, what you see, I think, is a little bit more of a personal touch in all of these communications and in the media generally, which is interesting given the fact that none of us are actually talking to each other in person right now.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think, we've all seen it when you're on a Zoom call and someone's kid comes in and, or you have a screaming baby in the background, or, people are just more, they're more relaxed, they're more forgiving, which I think is certainly a good thing, to come out of it. And I think, there will probably be more waves of the emotions that we have when dealing with the situation that we're in. But I do think it's just humanized us all a bit. And also just, in my line of work, every one of my clients believes that their product or their brand or what they're doing is the most important thing in the world. And, it probably is to them, but I think that this moment in time has also just, for me at least, I've seen in certain clients that it's made them understand, okay, like, there's bigger things to worry about, or how can I use the resources I have for good, and by establishing more of a charitable component or, or whatever. So that's been really cool to see also.
Is there anything, thinking this through, because you talked about the human touch and some of the things that you guys had to do to pivot yourselves, looking for different kinds of clients and so on. Is there anything that you learned during the last 6-7 months that you think you will continue to do or will continue to guide you going forward when we get back to some semblance of normal?
Yeah, a couple things. I've had to be flexible in terms of like the ways we worked with clients, in terms of, the length of our engagement or the pricing, or things of that nature. And normally, I would view some of those things as like almost like a step back, like, oh my God, okay, wait, our rates aren't as high as they were 6 months ago or whatever. But it's actually wound up being beneficial for the company because we've had happy clients that have referred us to more people. And then, in a proper amount of time, then you can kind of get back, to pricing or contractual terms of where you want to be. So I think having more flexibility on the client side is definitely something I've learned and will continue to do. But at the same time, I'm in the service industry. And so to me, anytime a client calls, it's like, I need to be there to pick up the phone or reply to the email or whatever. But it's made me kind of realize that the importance of that self-care and that separation from work and home life. I just started working from my husband's office about a month ago. And up until then, we were working from our New York City apartment with a 2-year-old and it was crazy. And so there felt like there was no separation whatsoever. But now that I have an office to go into, especially now when I'm home with my daughter and the workday is done, it's a lot easier for me to put the phone down and not look at it again until she goes to sleep. So that's been something that I will definitely adopt as well. And I think just like in general, the flexibility of working remotely, our business has done it. We've done it well. So have many, many others out there. I definitely know that my colleagues and myself want to get back to working together in person. Like we miss that routine, we miss that collaboration, but it likely is not going to be the same way it was before, Monday to Friday, 9 to 5, the sort of death march commuting and going in every single day. It doesn't need to be like that, So I think that'll definitely be something that we continue to look at in the future.
Yeah, I think that's a great point about, killing the commute. I think we're all learning in real time that some of those meetings could have been emails. Some of those emails could have been done away with as we all kind of figure out how to do some of these things remotely. I do want to remind folks that you can ask us questions. I believe you have a Q&A feature that you can use, and I will continue to ask questions that you bring up as I see them pop up in the chat window. So please don't be shy if you have questions. Just lay them out there and we'll work them into the conversation. I wanted to ask you, because we've got a bunch of students who are participating in this experience as well, folks getting their MBAs with aspirations to have careers in the entertainment space. What kind of advice would you give them, particularly now when we've got kind of a topsy-turvy situation and in-person interaction is going to be tougher to achieve and maintain? What should they be doing?
I can really only speak from my own personal experience, but whenever I get somebody who emails me and they want to submit their resume or they want to talk about a career path or anything like that, the people that I'm likely to reply to more are the ones who actually have spent 4 minutes looking on my website or checking me out and just understanding who I am. Like one of our newest interns emailed me and he's like, I wanted to reach out. I just listened to a podcast that you did and I loved when you talked about this and that. It's kind of like what I was saying before about that personal touch. It works, like it works. I mean, people want to be flattered. They want to know that you're genuinely interested in the job, that you're doing. And also like people are busy, I mean, we should be helping out people, but a lot of people don't have time to do that, or they just have too many emails or too many things going on. So I would just say to just, try as hard as you can to just take some time to just make your outreach really, really personalized. I would say that if you're finding it to be a challenging entry into the workplace, which it likely certainly is right now because of the pandemic, I would just say be really open to freelance, part-time, internships, unpaid gigs. I mean, you never want to devalue yourself, but at the same time, there's something to be said for getting your foot in the door, no matter how you can. It obviously can't go on for forever, but, contacts that I've made at internships from 20 years ago, I'm still in touch with today, and we're still doing, work together. So I think, those are just a couple suggestions.
I love that. And it's funny because I've heard you mention research and Google is your friend probably half a dozen times in this conversation. Just out of curiosity, how much time do you spend? I mean, you represent clients across a bunch of different industries. You've been working in this space for a long time. You were a booker. You had to know who the people were that you were booking and so on. What's your routine? How much time do you spend researching?
A lot. I mean, like all the time, and it's like, for me, it never really ends because even when I open up Insta to scroll or whatever, I'm following NPR. I'm following my clients. I'm following, industry thought leaders in the different sectors that we're in. So, for me, there's not so much of that clear cut separation between work and personal life, because also some of our clients are friends of mine, members of the media I'm friends with, so it kind of all blends together, which for me totally works. But my routine is, I'm up before my daughter is awake in the morning. I'm up, usually around 6, and I have my routine. I'm reading all the newsletters that I get, 6 different newsletters. I'm watching Morning Joe and then CBS This Morning. I'm listening to NPR when I'm coming into the office. And also just the materials that our clients are sending us is substantial. So there's a lot that we have to read and consume. And there's just no way around that either. You have to love what you're doing and want to learn more about it all of the time. And if you don't, you could still have a good career and be successful, but it just won't be as enjoyable, because we spend so much of our time at work. So, luckily for most of our clients, for me, it's good because there's a mix of so many different industries that we work with. So I never feel like I'm bogged down in only reading about one specific type of thing. So, that's how, but yeah, I spend a lot of time reading and researching for sure.
Are there any sources that you would give your gold star to when it comes to the business of entertainment or what's happening in the industry?
I think variety, right? Certainly I think is the gold star in terms of, the entertainment world. I mean, I know that in terms of broadcast, just getting on E! Or Extra or, Entertainment Tonight, those types of shows are really great. We've done a lot with Deadline too, which I think in terms of more industry, is really considered pretty successful as well.
Now here's another question from our participants. How large of a role do you see data analytics and internet technology playing in PR in the post-COVID world?
I mean, I think those aspects are always going to continue to be more important. I think that post-COVID or not post-COVID in terms of data analytics, I think it's going to be more important for my clients and sort of how their business fared and sort of what kind of promotions or techniques they used during this period really worked and resonated and what didn't. For me, the types of outlets we're pitching, none of them really change. I mean, they changed in terms of covering the virus more and covering different aspects of the pandemic more frequently than they previously had. But I think data analytics in terms of PR is going to continually keep to being more of an important aspect, but I'm not sure that necessarily in my industry, there's going to be that significant jump from post-COVID to pre-COVID.
With respect to analytics, do you ever coach your clients up on what some of the analytics mean or how to use them or how they might drive a metric forward, right? Is there do you leverage analytics ever to help your clients get better at what they're doing?
Well, I mean, like for one example will be like, clearly if a client tweets something and it gets a bunch of attention and buzz, and it's getting retweeted or shared like a ton of times, that's something that we'll lean into in terms of making sure that our media contacts are aware of, and that this is that this particular thought is doing well. We really think about on the data side of things, like just taking different posts or articles or clips that are doing well, and how can we elongate that? How can we continue to drive people to those different media placements? And so, we really advise our clients to work with different partners we have in SEO, in advertising and direct marketing, in social media as a way to continue to drive those particular pieces of content.
No, I totally understand. I ask because, what strikes me as really interesting is when we move from, these big media platforms, TV networks and so on, major publications to digital, and not to say that digital is not equally big, but in terms of kind of, digital is very kind of open in terms of people having access to it, and it's asynchronous, and there's a whole bunch of other elements to it. It strikes me that, having clients have some success in the digital space, these are platforms, one, that you don't control at all. There's not a person that you can call if something's happening on Twitter. There just isn't the person. And right. Two, it's hard to know how getting a bunch of likes or retweets translates into real clout, whether or not there's a message that's breaking through, or whether or not the thought leader is actually being heard or recognized. And it seems to me that there's some space to kind of demystify that for the clients. And I'm just wondering if that's a thing that you feel like is happening a lot. But it sounds like from what you're saying that there are other experts kind of in the ecosystem that help clients with that.
Yeah, there really are, just because, our main charge with our clients is to get them featured in the media. And then, as you just said, there's a lot of other types of firms and associates that then take that clip or that article and amplify it, and that's why, when you think of the media, there's just so many things that can go into it. But, one example, how we would see the amplification really working is we had a client who wrote an op-ed for The Hill, and it was this was a while ago, this was like a year or two ago, but it was on female voters and how female voters were going to, be the ones to decide the election. And the op-ed got shared like thousands of times, and was like really, really popular. As a result, we pitched that op-ed, and my client did an interview on Morning Joe, and they showed the whole op-ed, headline, and the whole segment was about that. And then we realized, without us even pitching it at all, but that 2 nights later, Trevor Noah on The Daily Show played the sound, like did a whole little segment, like a 45-second segment where he showed the clip of our client on Morning Joe with the headline. So, there are and that was for us like a very proud moment of just showing how like one piece of press got another piece, and for my client, it resulted in a deluge of different phone calls and emails and, people reaching out to her. I don't know specifically if she could say, okay, this specific appearance led to X number of, new investors or new clients for me or whatever. But it's one of those things then that lives on and that, can go on her website and that she can share with people and put into decks and whatever. And it just, showing the amplification of and the presence that she has in the media certainly is something that's attractive to different sorts of groups and people.
I love that. That sounds like an amazing success story.
Yeah.
Well, I think we have time for one more question. We've spent a lot of time talking about kind of the state of the state, and we kind of looked in the rearview mirror a little bit about, how you handled the COVID crisis and your career and so on. Why don't you look ahead? Because a year from now, 2 years from now, we're going to be in a different situation. And I think the work that you do is going to be even more important. I'm wondering if there are any trends or opportunities that you see in the future that get you really excited.
Yeah, I think just the trend in general of how TV and how we consume news, it continues to change and evolve and will continue to do so. And it makes me excited as a PR professional because there are just more and more opportunities and outlets for us to pitch our clients and to get them, featured and to get them interviews and everything like that. So that really excites me. And I think that also just in terms of like the content that's out there right now, I do think we're on the precipice, hopefully, of, a change in sort of the tone and tenor of the media and of the news cycle. I remember 10 years ago when I was still producing at CNN, in any one given hour on the network, there would be a political story, but there would also be an international news story. There would be a tech story, a finance story, a legal story, and so I think that we are actually there. The more outlets that are being created out there are going to give more of a platform to other important news that's happening in our world.
Awesome. Annie, I can't thank you enough for making the time for us. This has been an amazing conversation. It sounds like you got your hands full, but I love this insight into the way the business works and into the way that you handled launching your own business. Thank you so much for spending an hour with us. We owe you one.
Thank you. Thanks. It was my pleasure. Very happy to do it.
All right. To be continued. Folks, this concludes our conversation. If you have questions about Annie, Pace PR, the Center for MEMES, or some of the innovation that's happening in the entertainment industry, feel free to email us at memes@anderson.ucla.edu. Thanks and have a great day.